Welcome to this virtual session for the Charleston Conference. My name is Faye Holst and I'm the Communications Manager at IOP Publishing. In this session, we will discuss how small institutions can benefit even more from transformative agreements, because many academic libraries are using transformative agreements, also known as read and publish agreements, as a primary means to further their open access objectives. And for large research and intensive institutions, those benefits are very obvious, but are they the right fit for smaller institutions? Now, that is what we're going to discuss in this panel. And with me are Sankalp Garg, alumni from the Colorado School of Mines, and he is a very keen open access advocate and has published his work open access under a transformative agreement. And we also hear from Seth Vuletich, scholarly communications librarian at the relatively small institution, the Colorado School of Mines, and Stan Smith, from society publisher IOP Publishing, who will share insights into the effectiveness of TAs for smaller institutions. But first we start with Sankalp. Sankalp, take the floor.
Thank you so much, Faye. Hi, everyone. My name is Sankalp Garg. I was a graduate student at the School of Mines. I graduated in the fall of 2022 and did my master's in mineral and energy economics. Seth, if you could go to the next slide, thank you so much. So at the time at Mines, I was working on a research about natural gas certification in the US, a topic which is very relevant under the current energy transition dynamics. So on the left-hand side, just walking to 3 points. So we explored open access because our idea was to reach the policymakers and researchers where journal subscription are a financial barrier. That's where the School of Mines Library played a crucial role on our end. I was a part of a workshop also, which was hosted by the library that explained the transformative agreement with IOP and how the TA would help us in subsidizing the cost of the fees, the processing fees, and provided a guidance on applying for the funds and IOP's role after the submission of the paper. The article was under open access and it was without any additional fee, and the entire process was seamless. And we got the confirmation from the IOP that the article does qualify for an open access. Moving on to the right hand side, a little bit of a cycle of how the whole process looked like. So we started with our research with the idea that we had around the research for natural gas certification in the US, doing a review of it and the full life cycle of it. And the very last thing, which is the post the post when it's out there in the domain, that's where the real value lies in the open access and the transformative agreement with IOP. Next slide, please. Seth, thank you so much. So there were certain unexpected benefits which I did not appreciate in the very first go, but then over time I realized that these benefits, they can be grouped under 3 main headers. First one, we see that it received broader audience reach and increase our engagement, which is about higher downloads, citations, and opportunities for working with other industry people. And the third is about, again, partnerships as well with different institutions, with different departments. As Faye mentioned, Mines is a relatively smaller school. So getting to collaborate with like minds in the same energy field was really a value addition for us while this research was going on. And just to talk a little bit numbers here. So on the right hand side, it shows the difference between an article that I had under open access, which is in the blue bar, and one which was not under open access. So the article which was under open access with the IOP, it had a 9x download data, which I think is amazing, and it shows up in terms of the collaboration that we got under this article. One example which I can cite from this is that we received a communication from a researcher at Harvard who had accessed the article, and they were working on a similar research, and they wanted to partner with us on natural gas certification and to further explore the opportunities that were there in that field so that we can reach maximum policymakers in the US, maximum companies. And this is again just reiterating the idea of how important the transformative agreement was and still is for Minds, for all the researchers at Minds as well, and especially the graduate students. Lastly, I'll club it up into four headers in terms of where open access plays a role and where and how it compares to a traditional journal. So firstly, the cost to readers. So if you talk about a normal reader, let's say uh, in certain nation outside of US, then the processing fees or just to read an article, it can be really high. Uh, that's where open access provides the opportunity for every researcher who has an interest in a certain topic to read that article without any fees. So the cost to reader for under open access and with the TA, that's really low, or it's almost negligible. In terms of visibility, I would say visibility is under both the traditional journal as well and the open access, because you can get an idea of what an article is talking about in a traditional as well, just reading the abstract. But again, open access has an edge here because in terms of you can do a deep dive into a paper and talk and do brainstorming with the researcher who had written that paper under open access. And that delves into my third point, which is about accessibility. So global access, another example would be I heard from a researcher in, I think it was in South Africa, where they were looking to do a certain same thing because natural gas is a big thing for them, or they're trying to build more natural gas power plants into their pipelines and all those things. So they wanted to see how the certifications in the US have been, which our paper was talking about. And they used that methodology, which was made again possible by open access. Last thing, which I'll talk about from a grad researcher view or a researcher view as a student, then I think both of them, the traditional journals and open access, provide an opportunity because usually we are agnostic in terms of research when we are starting our research. But when we do a deep dive to understand how we can reach to more people, how we can talk to more people, how we can bounce back our ideas, that's where open access gives the real value and gives the, I would say, the real essence of it is in play for a researcher, because you get to talk to people, you get to meet people, you get to share your ideas. And that's what I would say the overall, the transformative agreement of IOP at Minds helped me out with. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sankalp. Seth, would you like to follow?
Sure. So as Faye mentioned, I'm Seth Vuletich. I'm the Scholarly Communications Librarian at the Colorado School of Mines. While I haven't necessarily been involved in the negotiation of our transformative agreements, I've certainly been involved in the promotion of them. So let's talk a little bit about transformative agreements. So I think there exists this sort of tension between publishers and libraries, right? Libraries have all of these great ideals. We need to want to provide free access to materials. We need stuff to provide this access for. We don't really own a lot of that content, and we want to limit our expenses. Publishers frequently want to control access. They own the stuff that we need, and are often profit-driven. That is not the case for all publishers, certainly not for profits like IOP, but these tensions kind of make negotiating sometimes difficult, despite a sort of common goal of disseminating knowledge. So with transformative agreements, libraries give up a little bit, right? We don't necessarily provide free access to everyone, but publishers give up a little bit of that controlled access as well. So we get rid of that. We need that stuff that is controlled access. The publishers own that stuff, but if publishers give up a little bit of that ownership and share it more broadly and facilitate those sharings, it gets rid of that. And if libraries decide, hey, we have a little bit of extra budget, we don't need to maximize our limitations of expenses, we can afford a little bit more than that, and publishers say, we're not going to focus so much on the profit of this venture. We're going to, instead make a little bit of guaranteed income on a transformative agreement. It gets rid of that tension. So now we've cut all of that tension, and our goals can align almost completely, libraries and publishers, to disseminate knowledge and build sustainable and equitable operations. So that's kind of how I view transformative agreements. I view that as the sort of end goal of all of this. It's going to take some time to get there, where our purposes and missions completely align. But I think that is how I view transformative agreements. So I'll talk a little bit now about the sort of timeline and development of Mind's open access program. So in 2021, we started an article processing charges fund. That is actually how I met Sandkalp. He was involved in that as an undergraduate or as a graduate assistant on that program. And that same year, we entered our first transformative agreement with Cambridge. That was a consortial agreement. So the cost of this agreement is probably somewhat nebulous because it happened through a consortium. Then in 2022, we continued those article processing charges funds, and we entered a transformative agreement with the Association of Computing Machinery. Then in 2023, the open access article processing charges funds were discontinued. It was an internal institutional grant, and the administration decided that it, wasn't worth continuing. So that was a little unfortunate, but we continued entering more transformative agreements. So it was in 2023 that we entered this transformative agreement with IOP, and we also entered a transformative agreement with the Royal Society of Chemistry. Then in 2024, with exclusively library operating funds, we reinstated some of those article processing charges funds, only about $5,000 worth of them per academic year, so very limited. And we entered our largest transformative agreement yet with Elsevier. So I think that the biggest takeaway from these sort of transitions is that transformative agreements are incredibly budgetarily efficient. So as you can see, when we first started our transformative agreements, immediately they were cheaper on a per article basis. We were funding the full article processing charges, which wasn't the case before. I was only funding up to $1,000, which maybe covers half of an article processing charge. And the cost has only dropped since, as these transformative agreements are more broadly utilized and folks are more broadly aware of them. So the expenses per year for transformative agreements are less than what we were paying for these article processing charges funds. And the impacts are far greater. I think we're looking at somewhere around, like, already this year, 65 or 66 articles published under our transformative agreements for somewhere around a budget of about $10,000. And that's across all of our transformative agreements with all these different publishers. So I think that's extremely impactful. It's a way to sort of use the library's limited budget to impact these things and push things forward, where otherwise this would be somewhat impossible or extraordinarily straining on our budget. So some strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats associated with these transformative agreements. I think the primary strengths are that these are affordable and they are pretty economical ways to support open access. Some of the weaknesses are that it isn't free. Like, this is going to cost a library a little bit more than a normal agreement, generally speaking. They're also not necessarily equitable, right? An institution that is able to afford this is now able to support their researchers publishing open access in a way that a less wealthy or financially stable institution might be able to. It's also limited to the publishers who are willing to participate in these agreements over a very specific contract term. This isn't something that like exists in perpetuity, and these contract terms can change over time. So I see that as a potential weakness. But I think that there's lots of opportunities here as well. First, they scale well. These transformative agreements are, especially because they're relatively affordable and economical. We can enter more agreements and support more faculty across different departments as we enter more of them. I think that this can also increase the library impact and sort of visibility on campus. I think so much of what libraries do happens behind the scenes, and things are so seamless, especially with like electronic item delivery. Like people click and have access to something. The library kind of vanishes from this, right? People used to have to come into our building and see like that this was something that we were providing for them, but now it just seems like that is provided for them, not necessarily a library service. But I think this is one way that you know, rather than being the sort of cost center on a campus where we're vacuuming up all the money, we're distributing a little bit and making it easier on researchers and helping them spread their money a little bit further from grants. So then I think that there are some threats here as well, though. I question, especially for some publishers who are going fully open access, how sustainable this model is. It relies on the goodwill of libraries, and I think libraries are very keen to continue supporting open access. But if everyone has access freely to all of the published materials, I don't know what that looks like in the future. And so I think that can lead to some budgetary challenges potentially for publishers, but also if publishers increase the costs of these agreements, it could lead to budgetary challenges for libraries. So those are things to keep an eye on, I think, as we go forward in transformative agreements. But as it stands now, like I am thrilled with our transformative agreement, both with IOP and our other transformative agreements with other publishers. So some of the key takeaways as far as Minds is concerned are that transformative agreements can definitely benefit small institutions so long as those institutions are choosing transformative agreements that reflect the publishing habits of their faculty. They can be extremely cost-effective ways to support open access. They can help further the library's goals of both supporting open access and also supporting faculty and dissemination of scholarly articles and scholarly works. I think as a result, and as Sandkalp kind of touched on, this can improve the individual researcher's reputation, but also the institution's reputation as folks are more easily able to access the materials that are coming out of an institution. So I think that looks good for the institution to have very high citation counts on articles that are coming out. And then I think lastly is that this can really increase library and campus engagement. So as I said, the library is very often invisible on campus, but this is a way to increase our visibility, increase our impact, and let folks know like there are things that the library is doing other than just supplying materials to support their research and their work.
Thank you, Seth. Seth, that was a good overview of how these transformative agreements are benefiting your institution. We're moving on to Stan Smith at IOP Publishing.
Thank you, Sandkalp and Seth. As Faye said, I'm Stan Smith, and for the past 5 years, I've worked with IOP Publishing's customers in the central United States. Over the past 3 years, it has been rewarding to be a firsthand witness to the progress that is being made as open access gains traction among our customers. As more and more institutions migrate to read and publish agreements, I've seen the benefits of cost savings for the institution, the growth in the number of articles published, and an increase in impact through altmetric scores that published articles have made. IOP Publishing is owned by the Institute of Physics, a world-leading scientific society that has promoted physics and supported researchers since 1874. As a society publisher, we work closely with researchers, librarians, and partners worldwide to publish academic peer-reviewed journals, conference series, and books. All of the profits generated by the publishing division are reinvested in the Institute's initiatives. About 85% of the Institute's income comes from earnings generated by the publishing subsidiary, and our success is vital to ensure that the Institute of Physics can continue to fund their research, charitable activities, and outreach programs. We focus on building open access a reality. We're making progress. We encourage greater uptake of open access and provide outstanding publishing services to researchers and improvement of discoverabilities and impact of research. Open access publishing agreements, also known as transformative agreements or read and publish agreements, are gaining momentum across the United States as institutions seek to enhance access to research while keeping rising subscription costs under control. The effectiveness of open access is based upon immediate access to the research as mandated by some funding bodies, authors and researchers achieving higher visibility, institutions and their authors making a greater impact, and access to content being granted to everyone with no paywall or subscription barriers. Small institutions in particular benefit from open access publishing because they can attract funding and make it easier for small institutions to obtain grants, amplify research to a more inclusive environment, enhance reputations in the academic community as discussed by Seth, and as Sunkelp mentioned, open access supports student learning. Further, open access provides content to researchers worldwide. In total, IOP currently supports about 300 institutions in the United States with read and publish agreements. 79 of those agreements are classified as smaller institutions. CRKN in Canada was the first in North America to proceed with an open access agreement. The CRKN consortia has several small institutions among their members. Starting in 2023, more small institutions in the United States entered into open access agreements, including the Colorado School of Mines. The Colorado School of Mines is known for its focus on engineering, applied science, and mineral resources. With an enrollment of about 8,000 students, this prolific publisher has an output to rival many universities substantially larger. The Colorado School of Mines stood out as a candidate for open access because it is a reliable and consistent publisher partner with IOP. The migration from read-only subscription to a read and publish was simple, concise, and efficient. The proposal negotiation and contract process was only about 2 weeks. From 2023 through the third quarter of 2024, Colorado School of Mines published 15 open access articles that have received over 19,000 item requests and have already accumulated 15 citations. In 2022, the year before their TA was adopted, 57% of articles published by the authors at Colorado School of Mines were published as open access. APCs were paid for the articles that were published during 2022. During the first 21 months of the IOP open access agreements, 100% of the articles published by authors at the Colorado School of Mines were published natively in open access, with no APCs being paid. With no article publishing charges in their IOP open access agreement, the cost savings is substantial. Transformative agreements and open access publishing present significant opportunities for enhancing research access and for making an impact across the globe. However, small institutions must navigate changes related to sustainability and quality. As the landscape evolves, mutual collaboration and innovation will be key to success. Small institutions that participate in an IOP open access read and publish agreement save money, receive the benefits of a simple publishing process that does not require management by librarians, and the articles published receive higher Altmetric scores. Faye, back to you.
Thank you, Seth. And that brings us to the end of our presentation. We have listed all the email addresses here on the last slide. Should anyone have any questions, please don't hesitate to be in touch. And thank you for listening.